Hello, people online. Do you mind changing your name on Zoom so we know who you are?
Oh, change your name on Zoom. How do we do that? Can you tell us, remind us?
Oh, under participant, you have three buttons, you press it and you can change your name, I believe. Can we see the Zoom screen?
Eventually.
Yeah, see the people here. So
Yeah, just go to the three dots top right, and at the bottom will be rename.
Until they flip the switch.
Okay.
So, there you
Thank
go.
you.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. Oh, so I think I recognize Shelly and Stu.
Yep.
Hi. So you're introducing us and all on the session, right?
Yes, we will be. We're just a little disorientated because you're kind of in the front, but everyone's looking. You're looking to your right, so I'm assuming we're on the screen to your right. Is that okay? Good. Well, it looks like we've got about 2 minutes to go, and you can see. Can you see the PowerPoint up on that screen?
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, then I feel orientated, and we'll start in a minute if that's okay.
Okay,
This is gonna hurt my neck.
So can you hear us without the mic?
Yeah, we can hear you. It's not super clear, but we can hear you.
Okay.
Oh, this one's
To use the mic.
Right, you have to turn it on.
I tried putting the
We need some volume there if we're going to be responsive to their speaking.
Yeah, it's hybrid. So
No,
the
no,
moderators
we also
on
speak
Zoom.
it.
Do you know those things
Like-
are doing?
like-
No, you don't have to, it's already hooked up, so.
No.
Or, it's share.
No.
What's not green? We don't know.
No, it don't matter.
Oh, okay. So that's still on.
But that one, if you want that one, you can, have your own mic.
Okay, perfect.
So maybe, okay. Eventually this will.
Oh, yeah, this works. Okay.
Yeah, that sounds better.
No presentation,
No
no
presentation
presentations.
for us.
So
They
we-
have presentation, I guess, of my.
but they can run.
They
it from
can
there.
control the screen.
Yes,
Sure, yes.
Stuart Allen is the one that's going to moderate, so.
The slide should be changing there.
Yep.
Yeah, okay, excellent. Good. Well, it looks like we're on time. So are we good to start? I not being able to see everything in the room, I assume we're good to go.
Yeah, I'd
Okay.
say so.
Excellent. Well, thank you everyone for joining us, and we're obviously partly virtual and many people online in person as well. The ONE teaching team put this symposium together to hear from some of our past award winners on their teaching tips, how to teach sustainability, how to integrate it into teaching. And so we'll be focused on that for the next hour and a half. The symposium team, the symposium was organized by Nancy Lundrum, who's not with us today. My fellow moderator is Shelley Mitchell, who you can hopefully see on screen from the Holt International Business School. And I'm Stuart Allen, I'm from Robert Morris University. And then more importantly, our panelists are past award winners, Robert Saruf, Yvonne Montiel, Andy Hoffman, and Ray Andre is here online. And I would like to give as much time as possible to hearing from our experts talking about the teaching tips. So I'm not going to say too much, try to keep it brief, but just to share with you how we put together the panel. The award has been offered.
It's like a student. That's the.
Stuart, take
Stuart?
back over.
Oh, maybe you muted everyone.
Stuart, are you still there?
You're muted.
Oh,
There we go.
yeah, not sure what happened there. Apologies. So I was saying the 4 panelists are past award winners. The award was launched in 2018 and has been run for the last 4 years. And the award criteria are based upon experience and excellence in O&E related teaching, developing sustainability related teaching materials and courses, research and publications in this area, working with students in applied settings locally or internationally, bringing students into applied settings to enhance their learning, and promoting holistic, integrative, and interdisciplinary O&E learning. So to introduce the panel, first of all, and if you want to just stand up or nod, Robert Saruf is the Mirren Chair of Global Competitiveness and Professor of Sustainability and Management at Duquesne University, Palumbo Donahue School of Business. Yvonne Montiel is an Associate Professor of Management at the Zeklin School of Business at the Brooke College at CUNY. He was the award winner in 2019. Robert was our first award winner. Then Andy Hoffman was the 2020 winner. He is the Holcomb Professor of Sustainable Enterprise at the University of Michigan, with joint appointments in the Stephen M. Ross School of Business and the School for Environment and Sustainability. And then our 2021 winner, Ray Andre, is Professor Emeritus of Leadership and Sustainability in the DeMoore McKim School of Business at Northeastern University. And tomorrow, I think we're announcing our 2022 winner. So looking forward to that. And I just want to thank O&E, as well as Social Issues Management and Management Education and Development for co-sponsoring this session. So we asked the panel 4 questions, and those are up on screen. There is a handout available online attached to the session that includes not only the questions, but a synopsis of each of our experts' responses, but they're obviously going to share those now. And we'll be working our way through each of these 4 questions, and each panel member will have 3 minutes to share their insights on these questions. And then we'll pause in between questions for about 5 minutes to have some discussion between panel members, also open it up to the audience for questions. And then right at the end, again, we'll have an extra 15 minutes for further discussion. So that's kind of where we're going. I don't know if there's any comments or questions before we kick off. All right, excellent. So what I recommend then is we'll get started with the first question. What best practices can you share for integrating sustainability into teaching existing classes? And I am going to ask Robert if he would like to kick off.
All right, Stuart, thank you. And welcome everyone to the virtual and real and live session. I think the question in terms of the integration of this into a course, for me, needs some context. So I teach within a 1-year MBA program. We have core required courses that involve sustainability and also live projects that involve sustainability. So within that, I'm going to talk about maybe timelines or have you think about intersection opportunities at different times in which you can get information from students and interact with them, not just within your own course. So for me, it even starts at orientation. I can volunteer to be part of orientation and actually go to orientation, ask the question, how would you, the new incoming MBA students, define sustainability? And then I'll take that information. I can take that back into my classroom at a later time and say, here's how we defined it, right? And I don't have to pinpoint a person or anything like that. It can be anonymous. But I also, what I do is I ask them to do that again after their first semester is done, after their second semester is done, and after their third semester, and see how they progress through the year. So these are integration opportunities for me to intervene within a timeline It could be 1 year, it could be 2 years. Within my own course, I can do things like, being part of orientation and actually do the fish bank simulation from MIT and build that learning back into my course in sustainability. So I teach a strategic sustainability and models course. So I have purposeful elements of sustainability across it, not just pieces or modules. It's a core required course. Later on in this course, I also asked to turn this over to students and say, given your functional perspective, find the drivers, enablers, and performance metrics of sustainability that already exist in your profession. So I don't have to be the sage on a stage or a lecture to them in terms of what is already happening. They get to go out and find it and probably find really good current information about what that looks like and what's happening within accounting, within finance, within operations, within purchasing, within marketing. And then it's maybe a little bit more tangible to themselves. I'll then turn this over to them again at a later time and have them run seminars where teams of them will do a seminar on topics and I get to choose the topics. Sometimes I can let them, but it could be on net zero. What is it? How to use the social costs of carbon dioxide? How do we understand the sustainable development goals? And have them provide a seminar like they would if they were an employee within an organization that was teaching others on a larger team. So the seminar approach is a nice way for me to turn over control to them, but then get them have some buy-in to it. Later on, I'll move this kind of into a design competition. We'll actually have them use our business school as a living laboratory and give them an unlimited budget and say, choose 3 projects to make this a high performance building that has better impact on human health and productivity within it. We spend 93% of our time inside buildings, yet don't think about indoor air quality, energy consumption, water consumption. So I give that all to them. I turn over data for the building for it and have them present and actually can invite in others from the stakeholder group in the university to say, can we do this? Can we change it? Here's the business case for it. And the students are coming up with this. It's not just me. And they come up with new ideas all the time. Later on in the course, I then turn that into having them come up with their own vision and action plan for the future. And within a 2-page document, sum that up in terms of what they've learned. It can be based on that definition they had back at orientation. It doesn't have to be, but all by themselves, have a vision for what 2100 is going to look like and how you're going to be part of a more sustainable future at that time. And then I ask them to revisit that every year, put it on their calendar after they graduate and see how things have changed. And these are some of the ways in which I integrate sustainability into existing courses in pieces. But I also know that I do this within a different dynamic than most people. But I think I'm reaching a time limit.
Good. Thank you, Robert. Excellent. So let's hear from Yvonne next.
Hi, everyone. So let's see, I'm looking at my notes. So the way I've been able to integrate sustainability at my current institution at Baruch College is through getting involved in teaching a class that was required before I joined the school, which is business and society, which comes more from CSR and so on. But you also have the freedom to change the class and adapt it to the way that you want to teach it. And I think when I look at the syllabus now at undergrad, MBAs, and I also teach a PhD seminar, it has become a sustainability class. So I think we're in the process of changing the name of the course, but that's going to take some time, all these things. But that's kind of like the way I've been able to really get engaged in teaching these topics, because it's the area that I like the most, or I know the most, and I can contribute the most. Some of the things that I've done is trying to connect some of the conversations, case studies with emotions, and trying to make sure the students feel some days kind of devastated. We're not going to be able to solve these problems, and then the next day you bring a case when you see like maybe a hero or a CEO that is doing good things. So this idea of integrating more the emotions in the classrooms and maybe less rational. What else? Experiential learning. I try to use simulations, case studies, games like the SDG card game. So make it guest speakers that are inspirational. In the PhD class, I try to invite scholars. Especially now, it's easy because we do everything hybrid. So I bring a scholar that in sustainability that has published a lot, and the students can interact with that person, ask questions. And so making really collaborative and being able to bring people who are going to be inspirational for your students. And I think Yeah, so the idea of emphasizing the potential of business to contribute to address grand challenges in a positive way. So you have to reduce negative externalities, but you also have the potentials to increase or generate positive externalities because you have resources, knowledge, and you have responsibility to. And I think that's it.
Great, thank you, Vaughn. Next, let's hear from Andy.
Okay, you have our notes on the page, so you can go through those. I'll try and add some more color and context to those notes. As I think about this question, I think about the word translate. You need to translate it into the language of the particular course you're talking about. I could talk about climate change in a strategy course, an operations course, a finance course, an OB course. It's going to be very different in each one. Find the way to make it fit with their business education. So I make it clear at the beginning of my class, I'm not teaching corporate social responsibility. If I do that, I'm saying, go into other classes, learn how to maximize NPV, ROI, ROA. Come into my class, I'm going to teach you a different value set. That's not going to work. So I want to try and teach them that this is consistent with the courses that they're taking within the business school. This is also a helpful strategy when you think about going out to try and get a core course to adopt this. I did this once with the operations course. I went to the professors teaching the core operations course, and I said, okay, climate change, operations, what kind of terms, what kind of concepts work within your curriculum? Because trust me, if you go to the core course and say, I want you to put sustainability in there, their first thing they're going to say is, the class is full. We have all these concepts. We have to teach them all. I can't get rid of something else. So you got to make it fit. And so then we said, what case don't you like? And they said, this case, I don't like this case. What's it about? It's about queuing models. How can we work climate change into queuing models? REI, inventory management. I actually have no idea what I just said, but it worked for the operations core. And so that's how you translate it and get into them. So that's my first piece of advice. But my second piece of advice is that I got a lot of students now coming to me saying, we got to get it into the core. And that has been the mantra since I first started doing this in the early 1990s. And that day is over. Fitting it into a core that still says the purpose of the corporation is to make money for the shareholder is not going to work. And so it's time to refashion the core. And I think our students are ready for it. I taught a course this past year called Re-Examining Capitalism, and I was sold out. 72 students with a 36-person waiting list. The time is right now. We're ending the neoliberal era. We're ending that era of Milton Friedman, recognizing that there are systemic problems like climate change, income inequality, that the standard approach that we have within the business core is not going to work. So everything I said works for the system as it is now. Do that, but also think about changing the system by offering new kinds of courses. Trust me, the students are hungry for it.
Great. Thank you, Andy. You make it sound exciting, which is good. I think we all need that inspiration. Ray, you're up next. Ray's with us here online.
Unmuted. So when I think of teaching sustainability well, I think of three main things. The first one is, what am I going to teach? And what should you teach? I use the model of weak sustainability to strong sustainability, which has been championed by our own Nancy Landrum, to help us think about that as deeply as possible. And myself, I'm interested in teaching from the strong sustainability perspective, which is sustainability for the planet. And I focus on teaching climate and energy. Weak sustainability is generally defined as sustainability for the company alone. And that is not my interest, but it is a choice that a teacher makes as they enter into this field. The second question I ask is where, and again, a spectrum. You can put cases into existing courses. You can create a standalone elective. You can integrate your course across with a group of courses in your business school or across your university. What I have done and was able to do successfully was to create an independent standalone elective that covers an entire model of which I'll go into in a minute. And I would love to see that course become a standard required course in both graduate and undergraduate situations in my university. I would hope that we're at that point where we have a full course that's devoted to the entire spectrum of sustainability. It's been a very successful course. Currently, I'm teaching it online only, but typically in the last couple of years, I've run 2 or 3 sections in our spring semester, which is good. So the third question is how to teach it. And first of all, I organize the material in a way that's possibly different. I believe that this field of sustainability, strong sustainability, is so complex that a book is the best way to do it. A packet of articles or cases is not systematic enough or systemic enough either. So over the years, as I started to teach sustainability, I listened to what my students were telling me, what were their areas of interest, what were their areas of ignorance with my own reading, and put that together and created a model, a credible model of the basics that students need to lead change, whether in their companies or in their communities. And the name of my book is Lead for the Planet, 5 Practices for Confronting Climate Change. We could have said 50 practices, but we just did an informal cluster analysis and brought it down to 5, which incorporates a lot of different topics, obviously. So then also you need to be thinking about how to design the course. And I have done a lot of design and written a lot about design. The best place to look for my material is at my website, which is rayandre.com, very, very easy to find. There's a free handbook there with dozens of cases, exercises, assignments, sample papers, and so on that I have used over the years. There's an article there on teaching climate leadership using an integrative experiential approach, which appeared in the Journal of Management Education. There's my blog, which the best one, I think, for our purposes today is called Climate Change Manifesto for University Education. Another resource is a talk that I did in March to the UN Prime Group. You can just Google for that, which gives voice literally to my thinking about the model and how to teach it. Do forgive it, it's not my best talk. I was sick at the time, and it's got a lot of ums in it, especially at the beginning. But it does it. And then today I have posted in our website for the presentation today, the presentation that I did last year for the Academy, which was with an international team in a symposium. It was Lauren Albaredo, Florin Kapmeyer, Jennifer Lee, and Petra Moulton-Hill, all of us giving our best shot at what we were currently teaching. Finally, if you're out there and you're thinking about this and you want somebody to brainstorm with, I would love to be a resource to you. As a retiree, I'm spending too much time swimming in Walden Pond and would like to swim in your brain a little bit, and I'm very happy to help. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Ray. And in fact, on the ONE's website, we have just added a new teaching tab, which has a link to a resources area. And I've been plugging in resources every day, and I've added some of all of the panel's resources, and we'll be adding some more over the next month. So you will find links to some of Robert's work, some of Ray's work, and others on that website as well, if you're interested. So we're going to move on to the next question. I think it's a really useful one, which is what is the most important takeaway for students to gain by the end of the semester? So what's that big takeaway that you're hoping that they get from your course? And so we'll start again with Robert.
All right, thank you. So overall, I want them to take away, we can do this, right? And be a positive enabler of change and have a vision of something different than how business has been done over the last 100 years. And let them lead the charge for how it can be done for the next 100. But if I drill that down into usually a measurement kind of opportunity for this, because people want to be able to measure it, right? There's always accountants in the room or some finance or econ and all that. So in that vein or that context, I show them that as part of every business function to begin with, because I have them do their research and find it for whatever functional perspective they're in. And then pull back from that and say that we can have an integrated bottom line. So the triple bottom line, and John Elkington, after 25 years, said we should kind of cast this aside in terms of TBL and come up with something else. And an integrated bottom line is maybe it, where we can actually integrate and include environmental and social performance with our financials. Not have battles over whether or not we can value externalities or not, just put a value on it and see how it would change decision making. So when that happens, businesses can move away from an unbalanced sheet, which is where I say they currently are, to trying to understand what a balance sheet might look like in the future in that context. So through measurement, valuation, and management, we can look at more than that single myopic bottom line of the past and try to get to this integration opportunity of the future. And when doing this, this is when they tend to have some aha moments of, oh, really? Well, okay, we can only stop valuing only the positive things that we do, which is how we measure profit. And that's the only good thing we look at, and try to include all this other stuff and even run it as scenarios. So we can do this, if you want, with Monte Carlo simulations behind it and uncertainty, or just run scenarios in terms of what they think could be pathways for the future. One of the ways in which I try to make this a little bit more tangible is to use the social cost of carbon dioxide and look at it in terms of emissions coming from a manufacturing process, from a building, and then say, okay, purchase price, operation cost, 20-year net present value. If we look at it traditionally, it only includes this. If we include a social cost of carbon dioxide, which has environmental and social impacts folded into it, it was started by the Reagan administration, right? In terms of, if you want to throw the political piece into this, it's been there for a long time in the United States government. It's been used behind the scenes in terms of understanding impacts of policy. So it's been out there for a long time. It's not new. And we can show them it's already been done. There's lots of good information behind it in terms of how it's evaluated. Don't need to get into all the details of it, but then you can show the difference between a traditional approach that doesn't include this information versus a new approach. And could be the approach that they carry forward with, or even test assumptions with and take it into a next meeting and say, but what if? And then fill in the blank. What if we valued this? And see how decision-making can change and how ROI can turn into a return on integration. IRR can be an integrated rate of return, and net present value could actually be an integrated future value. And a different approach to looking at how we measure, manage, and make decisions about capital expenditures. So this is one way in which I try to build or bake that into what I want them to take away from it, is that it can be done, we can measure it, and they can enable this to be the change they want it to be.
Great. Thank you, Robert. I think there's going to be lots of good questions coming up. So next up, Ivan.
I think I mainly what Robert said. So let's see if I can add something. But I try to do the same thing, like try to make sure that I change the mindset, and the students, maybe some of them start the class like, oh, sustainability, it's kind of like in the way to make money, and you want to kind of like show that things are changing. There are some challenges, climate change, health challenges, but that brings new business opportunities. So they still want to be in business, they still want to be entrepreneurs, and they still want to make money, but they had to do it in a different way, right? So instead of like questioning whether sustainability is important or not, it's just like, it's here, we need to like, address these challenges. And if you are creative and you think maybe a little bit outside of the box, you are going to be able to adapt and also make money and also do new businesses, but that they are aligned with also addressing these different challenges. So the idea of like being the first mover in some of the industries and adapting to these new realities, right? So you don't want that's kind of the way I try to end the semester. This more motivational, positive. Business can do good, and you can do it. You don't have to leave business. Business is part of the solution, I guess.
Great, thank you, Yvonne. And Andy.
Okay, what I want the students to come out of my class is think about how to work this into their career. That's what they're there for. And so what I want them to understand is that you can't lead with good intentions. You need to really get your business fundamentals down, especially early in your career. So I tell my students, you go out and say, I'm the best at marketing coming out of my school. and I know sustainability, how to work it in. I know I'm the best in operations. You lead with where the jobs are. Over time, then you can start to change and start to drive change. There's a model that Deb Meyerson at Stanford developed that my students really resonate, the idea of the tempered radical, that you can have values that are at variance with the organization of which you're a part, and you can start to use those as sources of vitality and power to try and change that organization rather than either leaving, in which case the organization doesn't change, or staying and conforming, in which the organization doesn't change. But the tempered radical can play this role. I think this is really important because a lot of students come in and they want to save the world, and that's great. But I'll have students come to me with the question, where can I go to make the most difference in my career? And I say, that's the wrong question. Because if my answer is be an accountant at a resource extraction company like Rio Tinto, and you don't want to be an accountant, you don't want to work at Rio Tinto, you're going to die. And so how can you thrive? How can you actually thrive in your career, working in sustainability as a way to advance your career and move forward? That's truly sustainable. And that's a message I really try and drill into my students.
Great, thank you, Andy. And Ray, coming back to you.
So coming back to me, so my goal for the course, my standalone course, as you'll know, is that students should be able to advise and lead on a climate or energy concern for their company or their community. Advise and lead on a climate or an energy concern for their company or community. So to do this, they need a range of skills. And I like them to consider the model, which basically the 5 points are: 1, get the truth. In other words, understand the science behind the problem. Just to make a point, I teach them a bit about how to read science, but of course, we discuss how to use experts in the science. None of our students are going to be experts in the science. They're only going to be readers of the science. And they're going to have to learn to make a make or buy decision with respect to whatever environmental problems are coming their way. So number 1 is get the truth. Briefly, number 2 is assess the risks. And there's a whole career in risk assessment out there, as you all know. Number 3 is weigh the stakes. So I have them think about stakeholder analysis, business, government, communities, competitors, and so on, and how that affects this problem that they identify. Define the business of business, in which we look into more of the kind of things that Andy was just talking about. Number 5, engage global leadership and think systemically and globally. So across my course, I give various assignments to help build these leadership skills. For example, they have a debate. Who should define the social in social enterprise, elected governments or partnered corporations? This is something I've published in Management Teaching Review. And obviously debates are a great time for people to begin to develop their leadership skills and in working with these particular concepts. I give them group projects like a group hunt for oil. How much oil is left? So they go out and they look for it on the internet and find whatever they find. A group paper or project on En-ROADS, so they understand the state of the science without having to take a whole course on it. We discussed the social science theme of my book, which the question is that I ask is, will teen humanity succeed in a cooperative method, in a cooperative way to save the planet from the climate crisis that we're in? And I weave this social science throughout the book. So my favorite assignment is the capstone assignment that I give, which is a white paper, not a research paper. I ask students to identify a problem that has both an environmental and stakeholder components, and to go to research that problem using, of course, many of the factors that are in the model. So a sample topic would be, should a particular company build a subdivision in Phoenix given the predictions about drought in that region? Okay, that's my 3 minutes. But I have them avoid general topics like the implications of sea level rise on New York City. So I have them work for a client, a particular client, not a, a generalized sort of thing. So it's very important that they choose a real world problem that is important to them, because I don't want them to waste their time in my class memorizing abstractions. I want them to start thinking like leaders, like people are going to have to make hard decisions about climate and energy. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. And I can certainly hear across all four perspectives that have been shared there, an emphasis on context is helping students to engage topics of sustainability in their context and not just in abstract. On the last question, we kind of moved through both questions without kind of pausing and having some time to hear reactions to what other panel members have said. So I think if we want to do that, and we can also maybe hear a little bit from the audience, do you have anything to share just in terms of what your fellow panel members have said that you'd like to build on or reinforce or challenge?
Does anyone have a question? There's a mic right there.
Yeah,
You can queue up to the mic if you want to say something. This should be a group conversation because every school is different, every culture is different, every professor is different, and so you need to fit it with your context. Why don't you go ahead up to the mic? Yeah, I think they won't hear it online if you don't do that. And tell us who you are.
So hello, good afternoon. First of all, thank you for sharing. It's very, very important and inspirational, as you said. So my name is Barbara. I'm from Federal University of Paraná in Brazil. And I am doing my research in education for sustainability in the past few years. And recently, me and my students, we addressed a systematic literature review on sustainable development and curricula. And they read more than 4,000 articles. Yeah, they were intrigued. And we have a final sample of 275 articles dealing with this topic. And we could respond all of these questions. But the one that I want to address to you is related to the second one. What is the most important takeaway for the students? You responded brilliantly in the perspective of the teacher, the professor. And one of the main points that is a result of our literature review is a gap, actually, is about the outcomes of the teaching, the sustainability education. So how teachers evaluate their students' skills or learning objectives. So we understand that we need to have a different approach to teach sustainability. And we also need to have a different approach to deal with the assessment. What do you do regarding this? My attempt is related to competence assessment, but it's difficult. You need to think about the whole planning of the course need to be addressed to the competence. So I want to hear from you how the different approaches that you are using to assess their learning related to sustainability. That's it. Thank you.
So can I have the floor? Thank you. I'm very happy to give my students objective exams on certain things like what is the state of the planet? How does climate change work? Because at the very beginning of the course, I think it's very good for them to have that kind of background. And I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but I want them to study it. So I test them, but then I use that as a major evaluation, that project, the white paper that I was telling you, which integrates science and politics and leadership. And depending on where the course is given, if it's given I'm really speaking in a totally online asynchronous environment. But if it's a course that's in person, I do a lot of having them give presentations, have them defend their analysis and their decision in the paper, and so on.
Go for it.
So you're basically asking our grading scheme, which is always a challenge, every class, and you're going to get as many different answers as there are professors. My approach, I don't like, it depends also whether you're talking about grad and undergrad. But with grad students, I don't like exams. I don't like to be able, to me, an exam is saying, prove to me you did what you said you would do before you walked into the classroom. And I don't want to do that. To me, a next step would be apply it. And then a step beyond that is teach others. And there's an old adage that you'll learn more by teaching others. And so I actually assign my students to write a case study. And if I really like it, I'm going to work with them to turn it into a polished form that will actually be published and used in a subsequent class. And that really motivates them to work their butts off. So they have to think about the learning objectives of how they would teach what's in that case to somebody else, and at the same time applying it. And I find that really, really a powerful tool.
Well, I kind of go multiple ways with this. So within one class, it's a design competition at the end to have them compete for good ideas, proven, benefits that come out of this that are environmental and social benefits, not just the financials, and not a final exam. I also teach in live consulting project courses, and I'm actually back and forth and experimenting with ungrading, where I keep the numeric grades to myself, but instead give them the evaluation and the opportunity to revise something. But when I walk into the class, I want to walk into the class thinking that everyone gets an A. And then what do they need to do to get to the A is back on them to figure out it's a reflection piece. And at the end of the semester, we actually sit down together in one-on-one meetings to reflect on their work over the semester. And what some research has shown is in this area is more often than not, they actually underscore themselves. And I have to elevate the grade sometimes. And
I bet there's a gendered aspect of that too.
yeah, and there's, I think, something that they're going to remember years beyond graduation versus a grade on an exam. So I do that. But the other way in which we also circle that is a 360-degree feedback. I have other faculty evaluate them, their presentations and their teams, and I have the clients evaluate them, and they have to evaluate them on purposeful, scales that are up to the evaluator, but that involves sustainability. So everyone has to at least try to think about or reflect on what that might mean, including the client, who sometimes doesn't have any idea at all, but that's why they're seeking the help of a team of students. So these are the different ways in which I try to get at that. Not very scientific in some of my approaches, but more qualitative and reflective, where I think, or at least I hope, and based on some anecdotal feedback from alumni, that's where they tend to remember something.
If I can jump in 1 second, there's a really neat tool that I've not been able to use because at my school we have a forced curve, which I have some serious problems with. It creates a competitive environment. That said, the author's name is Zander, and Zander, they wrote a book on I believe creativity, but they have a really cool tool if you can do this. In the first class, you tell everybody you're going to get an A. Now write me a letter and tell me why you deserve it. And they will actually write the contract for how they will work in that class to earn that A, which I think is a very powerful motivating tool.
Yeah, he's a music teacher, the art of possibility.
The art of possibility.
Yep. There's a good YouTube video on him talking about that same piece of that in a way. And it's a really interesting dynamic that completely flipped my thinking when reading it and thinking, how do I take this back to the classroom? How do I change this?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if I can add anything, but because a combination of what Andy and Robert said, I use some case studies. Some of them are your case studies or your student case studies. I like also what Robert does, and I try to do it consulting project with a company. And if I can, I involve someone in the company that comes to the final presentation to not grade, but also give an assessment, this is useful or not. And the peer evaluation that Robert was saying. So all the students are also giving feedback about the other students' presentation. So I use that also as part of the deciding, who gets an A or an A- and so on. But so a combination of all these different, and there's so many resources out there. I mean that available in ONE website or any other case database and so on.
Great. We have two audience members also with questions. The one is Iman, you've had your hand up. Would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, thank you very much for the panel. So I'm Iman Amr. I'm from Holt International Business School, and I found it very interesting for all 4 questions, and I relate to what the panels were saying. So I do have a few comments and then one question. So in terms of personally, how I integrate sustainability in my classes, I usually teach immersion technologies, and I try to kind of show that sustainability is a major part. It's not a silo like course only that you would have, but it's an integration with other parts. In terms of practices and what tools or how this works, I believe like Ray mentioned the white paper, or this is one of the practices I use also with a challenge to give them a sense of they are the one who will make the change. So they imagine how to solve an actual societal problem, and they do see the value. And usually I would call an expert in sustainability. In that specific case, Professor Mitchell is my colleague, and she usually comes in as the expert of sustainability, for instance. And sometimes we have also like external clients, and the students, they really like to see the perspective of different professors. So like finance professor, sustainability professor, innovation or technology. So they see that it's not something in isolation. And that kind of relate to question number 2, where they will feel empowered and they can be that change, right? So they can make that change. Now, this is in terms of how personally integrate, especially that at our school, like the SDGs are like a main part. My question is, sometimes there are like some resistance to have that integration of sustainability when they are expecting a technology course or finance course or others. So did you ever like encounter some resistance or like, oh, this is not the main topic, and how you would overcome this if there are any practices? Thank you.
I think that's question 3. Stuart, do you want us to go there now, or do you want us to wait?
I think if you could integrate that answer into it, because I think that question 3 kind of asks, a broader question, which is how do you overcome that resistance that you might experience as a faculty member when you're trying to put together a whole class? Whereas I think Iman was kind of saying, when students are coming in and expecting that this is a finance class or a technology class or something, and you're bringing sustainability in, do they resist it? I'm not sure if anybody has a specific answer to that aspect of the question, that particular angle.
Well, I would just come back to my idea of translating. If you want to talk about operations, you don't want students to feel that you're preaching at them. You don't want them to feel that you're giving them a value projection. But if you can actually connect this to operations, finance, accounting, it's easier and easier to do. SASB is changing its accounting standards. It belongs in accounting. You can make the case that it fits within the courses that you're offering. Just don't let them sense or feel that you are telling them what their value should be.
Thank you.
Good. We have one other question online as well from Nicholas, and Nicholas, I don't know if you want to say your question, or if you'd like me to just go ahead and read it. I'll give you a moment.
I can try. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
First of all, thank you, Andy. I've benefited from Andy's mentorship as a postdoc at Michigan, and I'm now standing by the creek at my new university, all because of Andy. So thank you. I'd like to ask for some advice on how to publish teaching innovations in outlets like AMLE and Journal of Management Education. We have a newly approved curriculum that I'd like to share with others through those outlets. Thank you.
Good. Well, I was going to say a whole lot of you have published in some of the important management journals, so I'd be interested in hearing your responses.
I was going to start with a new program. It's a perfect time for pre and post data, right? Both with the faculty involved, which we hardly ever see in terms of publications, and the rest of the curriculum, not just the students, and try to look at the whole system in terms of what was the kind of the onset goal for this and how you were going to create this product, being a student in MBA, if it's graduate or undergraduate? And then how well did you do in terms of everyone's input to that, and not just something else that may be assurance of learning or AO reporting within the school for AACSB accreditation? So I think it's a pre and post opportunity with something new. It stands out to me initially, but there's so many qualitative things that can be done, but are a little bit harder sometimes to get at. But in a new program environment, I think it's a perfect time to extract as much of that learning as you can and use it for the next iteration of the program, not just for the publication.
If you mentioned the Journal of Management Education. So the Management and Organizational Behavior Teaching Society has these two journals, Management Teaching Review and the Journal of Management Education. If you have something, a really cool experiential exercise, you want to send it to the Management Teaching Review. And you don't need data about its success. The criteria right now is will other professors like it? And if they don't, they won't use it. And we don't care about the criteria, the evaluation. Journal of Management Education is a little bit more complex in what it's looking for. And I would, at the risk of self-promoting, the two articles that I've written that are on my website or available would be samples for you for the difference between Management Teaching Review and the Journal of Management Education. And then AMLE is a much more complex writing project with research and lots of theory thrown in. That's how I would hierarchically range these journals.
Yeah, I think if I might add to Nicola's question, and the process is going to be the same. You have, at least for AMLE, we published one piece and it was 5 rounds. You need to have theory, but you need to be lucky that the AE likes it and the reviewers too. So, but I think right now it's a good time to try to publish all this sustainability, because I feel there is a lot of everyone trying to figure out how to do it, and we're supposed to be the experts. And so if you have something interesting, cool, as you said, I think just look at other samples of articles that are also being published in sustainability and these journals, and try to follow a little bit that model, but also being innovative.
Sure. Yeah, I would reinforce that and just say that I think it's really fundamental if you're able to link that new curriculum to some kind of outcome that tends to, in my experience, sit really well with JME and AMLE. So good. Let's move on to the next.
You.
Thank you, Nicholas. Let's move on to that next question, and we are going to have more time for discussion as we go. So the third question is this issue of how do you overcome resistance to developing or proposing an entirely sustainability-focused class? So how do you get that? How do you get that past the dean, past the faculty? How do you make that work?
All right, Stuart, should I go in that order again?
Yes. Thank you, Robert.
All right. So I think to reiterate what Ray said earlier, you can publish a book on this, right? And that fits your course dynamic, what you envision it to look like as you lay out that syllabus. It can become what you want it to be in terms of a book. That maybe isn't the starting place for it, right? That may be something that morphs out of it later on. And that's what I've done with an integrated management book and how sustainability creates value for any business. And use that as kind of a way to help solidify what was already taking place in the course, as was mentioned before, with case studies and articles cobbled together from these types of things. And it came up before, the question from an audience member before the session even started, where do we get access to resources? And thanks for making a syllabus available online, right? So there are resources like the page prize submissions that are a database of syllabi that are already out there. And you can show them if there's resistance that says, you can't do this in, insert functional perspective, right? Marketing, accounting, finance, whatever, operations. You can instead go to them and say, well, look at all these winners of awards from the Aspen Institute, from the Page Prize, from these other places that they're already doing this at Ivy League schools. They're doing this in competitor schools. go throw at them the benchmarking business case for this for your class and say that everybody else is out there doing this possibly. There's resources, there's books. Why can't we? Or at least give me a chance, right? Let me out of the gate with this and start a new class, see how it goes, iterate and improve and go forward. So awards are great places to find this. AACSB accreditation includes this in terms of standard 9, now asking for societal impacts from business schools. And you can say, well, this is how this course now was a module or an elective and maybe in the past, and we can move it into the core even, because AACSB accreditation is looking for these types of things. So those are some of the ways in which I've had to try to leverage conversations, even with others, to let them know that this is legitimate and it isn't based on belief systems or politics. It's already being done. And everybody else is out there going to beat us at this, right, if we don't close the gap. So those are some of the ways in which I've tried to position information and examples to overcome resistance.
Yeah, I think in my case, in my institution, if I answer this question, would be no resistance as long as it's elective. So the question is more, how do you overcome the resistance to proposing an entire sustainability focus class that it's required to MBAs? And so that's something that we are now discussing, and there is a lot of resistance because, you know, how many required courses the MBA should have, and this sustainability standalone is not as important in some other areas. We need to do what Andy says, embedded in operations, embedded in strategy, embedded in marketing, and that's kind of the approach they want to take. But all at the same time, it's so hard to like really do it because a lot of the faculty, is not that they don't believe in it, they just feel not prepared to integrate it, right? So that's kind of like I'm okay with not having sustainability required as long as it's embedded, but how are we going to embed it and who's going to do it? That's challenging, I think, in some schools. Maybe it's different in Michigan, it's easier. But in ours, you know, I mean, I'm like worried about having some sort of symbolic ESG sustainability implementation that doesn't really, it's there, and especially in some of the, like finance, accounting, some of these required courses. So, but the resistance is about having it required as a standalone class. The last thing is that what they're trying to do, at least it's just have a learning goal that it comes from the curriculum committee, and then once you have that, then there is no, it has to be integrated, and it has to be something that all the students are exposed or they're learning. So that's, I think that's the approach that we see in my school.
Okay, I'll go next. I have 3 ways of thinking about an answer to this question, and they may not all agree, but take them for what they're worth. The first is strike while the iron's hot. The topic is so hot right now. I mean, IMD has centered their curriculum around the Sustainable Development Goals, Georgetown, INSEAD, you can go down the list. And, you know, at Michigan, if you go to the dean and say, can we do X? The first question out of the dean's mouth is going to be, are our peer schools doing it? It's a question that drives me crazy because that by definition is not leadership. Be that as it may, if that's what they want to hear, use that as a tool. So right now, the idea of having an opposition to a sustainability course is quite interestingly bizarre, because all the schools are doing it and the students want it. So that's the first answer. The second answer is nothing succeeds like success. And so stack the deck. So if you're going to offer a new course, find a group of students who are interested in taking the course before you propose it. Find some speakers. If you need to, find a grant. Find ways to make sure the course works. And if it does, others will emulate you and want to do the same thing. I've been teaching sustainability, like I said, since the early 1990s when it was a small niche. And now I find it quite amusing, actually. Many of the people that refused to be on my committee in the early 90s now list sustainability as one of their core areas. That's how hot it is. They were the ones that said it doesn't belong in a business school. And now there's this sustainability is what they're all about. There's answer number 2. Answer number 3 may contradict the prior 2. And everyone has their own way of approaching this. And my approach right now is I'm actually moving away from the word sustainability. I feel that sometimes sustainability had become It's got a lot of cultural baggage. People hear sustainability. It's for those people over there. And to my mind, the challenge right now is reorienting capitalism to deal with these systemic problems. So I offered a new course called Reexamining Capitalism. I offered a new course on business and democracy, bringing the public policy school and the business school together in the same course. What a strange idea. Yet I have so many business school students who think that government has no role in the market, which is quite frankly bizarre and naive. And I have a lot of public policy students that think that business is the enemy and don't go near them, don't go into the business school. That's bizarre and naive too. And so I'm even going further. I'm offering a new program called Management as a Calling. I had to get a grant to do this, the Arthur Vining Davis Foundation, because you want to talk about really getting opposition. This one's getting some serious opposition. Either one, that's really weird. We've never seen that before. This is why you can't do it. Or number two, that's really cool. How can you do it for my program? Or number three, that's really cool. Let's get it going. And so overcoming that obstacle, overcoming that resistance. But, you know, if you're doing something really interesting and innovative, you're going to have resistance because let's face it, we live in a very conservative institution. I don't mean in the political sense, but just resistance to change. What do you mean Milton Friedman's not right? What do you mean that the purpose of the corporation isn't just to make money for the shareholder? You will get blowback. But again, stack the deck. Our students want this content. They really do. The time is now. When I first started teaching, students who want to change the world, they went into schools of government and nonprofit management. Today, more and more are going into schools of business. That gives me hope. And it also gives you energy to try and get these courses going. Over to you, Ray.
Very, very well said, Andy. I'm so glad we brought the dirty word of government in here. So I think it's crucial that students come away from their university education with a sense of how business and government interact on environmental issues. Now, is that going to happen if we try to embed sustainability in various courses? I think the answer is no, because most professors wouldn't feel comfortable enough to address the subject effectively. And I don't blame them. For me, I happen to have a background in business government relations and done some research there. And over the years, I've looked at that kind of stuff. And so I'm comfortable doing that. So to some extent, I think the best, put it this way, the most robust, comprehensive teaching is likely to be housed in particular individual teachers. And that argues for independent, self-sustaining, separate non-elective but required courses that are taught by those specialists who are generalists. So good luck with that.
Good. Well, let's queue up any questions or responses to each other.
Thanks so much for your presentations. So I'm Sylvain Bureau. I'm part of ESCP business school. So ESCP is an interesting case because it's the oldest business school created in the world in 1819. So when you talk about tradition, we know what it means. So I'm based in Paris, and we have colleagues. We launched a conference and some contents about degrowth. So I was super happy to hear you mentioning, how we could escape this strictly focus on business models and stuff, and how we can talk about politics, capitalism. So degrowth is a big topic for years in economics, for instance. So I would like to know if you address this topic and how you do so, because that's can lead to resistance and misunderstandings, I guess. Thank you.
I do. I want to expose students to ideas that challenge them. Degrowth, sustainable consumption, questioning GDP, questioning discount rates. There are values embedded in all those. They don't have to take it lock, stock, and barrel. They don't have to think it's a good idea, but I want them to be exposed to it because it brings up the question, do we always have to grow? I taught a core course one time, a core strategy course, and we had a case on Walmart. And it was all about their growth strategy in other countries and adapting their supply chains. I saved the last third to say, okay, we talked about growing, now why grow? Now, a third of the class looked at me like I had 3 heads. A third were a little puzzled, and a third were, the light bulb went off like, oh, that's a really interesting question. Why do we have to grow? So maybe degrowth isn't the answer, but it does bring in, you can bring in Herman Daly, you can bring in steady state economics, you can bring in a lot of different ways to say, I'm going to augment your and expand your education. And this is just one model and tool for doing it. So I like the idea of degrowth, just to get them to challenge taken for granted assumptions. Because, you know, the earlier question, what do you want students to take out of this? One thing I also want students to take out of this is your degree, this is your life. Do not come in and just become a sponge for whatever your professors tell you. You can actually disagree, you can actually reject some of it and choose your career and your path the way you want it to go. And so degrowth does blow their minds in some very interesting ways.
You know,
Okay.
along those lines of big topics, the students, my students anyhow, are hungry, assuming they have the time, to discuss big topics like degrowth. One of the ones that snuck into my own book is rationing. So I have a little section in there on rationing based on the brilliant book by Stanley Cox, Any Way You Slice It. So who cared about rationing? Well, guess who cares about rationing now? Europe. All of Europe cares about rationing. So if the students came in, you know, come to our current era of bad guys and oil, and they have at least imagined that, oh yeah, rationing, that happened during the Second World War, blah, 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 and they have some ideas about that, they are much more likely to engage with the problem than if they had not been exposed. So yeah, great, big ideas, bring it, let them discuss it. They love it, and I think it's what education is really all about.
Yeah, another concept that I'd bring in that's similar is local economies. You know, I have a case on Berkshires in the Berkshires of Massachusetts of just trying to create a local economy. You can talk about Monaghan. And that is another element, another piece that some of them don't get it. They never will. That's okay. But some of them really do come out of it going, that really is interesting, and that may affect where I take my career, because at the end of the day, can you have effect on the local scale or the national scale or the international scale? You choose. If you're not doing the local scale, I mean, I don't know about your business schools, but we are steering everybody towards multinational, big time jobs, and scratch the second part of that sentence, multinationals as the only form of organization, and simply is not. And I want to expose them to other ways.
Ivan, did you want?
We talk about the growth, and we talk about, well, in one of the sessions about population growth and controlling population and the one-child policy, and should we do the same thing in Europe and the US, like where the government tells you max 2 kids or 1 kid, and all these different conversations, which this could lead to the growth, right? Less population, so the growth slows down. So this kind of provocative questions, I think the students, we do a debates, and they can talk about the 2 sides. So bringing all these, I guess it's provocative, or really things that they never thought about it, are useful for the students.
I actually don't explicitly use degrowth, but instead we can get at this in other ways and talk about the right kind of growth, or what is growth, and even use things like the En-ROADS climate interactive simulation to actually get to that, and even get to population in the end, and say, look, if we just look at population alone, we're skewing the conversation and everything that this is about. But if instead we look at 18 different levers we can pull and change policy and get collaborative environments where governments, organizations, and NGOs even all work together towards these goals, right? Then we have the right kind of growth, and population really can be taken off the table if it's a population issue, or how they might perceive this, right, in terms of what they're looking at. So instead, I try to implicitly build this into multiple things in terms of what kind of growth do we want to have? Do we want to have really high performance buildings? Do we want to have better transportation, mass transportation? All these types of things are good kinds of growth versus do we keep wanting to subsidize fossil fuel industries and systems that have been subsidized for 150 years to the tune of $11 million a minute? And what can we do with those resources elsewhere if growth means something different? So I don't deep dive into the degrowth part of it. And I appreciate the context of how that can be used and leveraged in different ways. But yeah, I don't know, I haven't gotten to that one very deep. But instead I tried to go shallow and broad.
But you're taking us down a very interesting area of the take up for granted assumptions within business education writ large. Efficiency is always good. Well, actually, no, it's not always good. Amartya Sen has a wonderful quote. It said, a system can be perfectly Pareto optimal and still be perfectly disgusting. That's a quote from Amartya Sen. Efficiency isn't always good. Or our business schools are built on the model of the win-win. That's why business schools are moving into this. Hey, folks, we can get rich solving climate change. Well, actually, we can't. And we have to teach students how to deal with some win-lose scenarios, like how do we dismantle the fossil fuel industry? How do we do that? That's not a win-win, that's a win-lose. But is anyone going to tell me that to deal with climate change, we can still have the fossil fuel industry as it's presently configured? No, we can't. Are we teaching students how to do that? No, we're not, because that's not a way to make money. And so these are some challenging issues that, to my mind, go at the core of rethinking business education, which is where this ultimately needs to go. But for now, we've got to take our wins where we can.
Yep, I've had some great conversations with my students about leadership as ending and the practices of ending in leadership. We do have
We have one more question.
one more question. Good.
I'm making my way to the mic.
Thank you very much. My name is Stanislav Pavilov. I'm from Fairfield University. And I also happen to be a member of the Biathlon group, and I also participated in the Club of Rome events in my previous career. And why I'm saying that is that if we think about the sustainability from the strong way, the sustainability for the planet and so on and so forth, a lot of thinking is there, and foundational thinking is built around the concept of catastrophe. Right? Think about the limits to growth. Think about the recent book of Václav Smil, where he talks about the between apocalypses and singularity. So my question is, when you design the sustainability course, do you somehow translate the concept of catastrophe and integrate it into your teaching, or you just leave it behind?
I can start with that because I think I can build on a person Andy referenced earlier in terms of the art of possibility and give everyone an A. He also talks about things in terms of a downward spiral. And I think that could be an opportunity to take us into a downward spiral where probably most of us are all the time. If we turn on the news, it takes us to that. And I don't set it up as catastrophe, but I've asked this question in multiple countries when I go there, what will it take to change? And ironically, the answer often comes back to a lot of people are probably going to have to die. And that's the catastrophe, right? So I can use that to kind of come back into it at a later time in an international context and try to give some color commentary of where that might go without a specific catastrophe being named or what it might be. But the catastrophe part of it is hard for me to get my own hands around because I'd rather be the part of the positive vision and what we already know we can do and how it's already possible. And I'm worried about how dark and deep we can go with the catastrophe, but that's just me. That's part of myself and nothing that's mandated to me or dictated in terms of how I can or cannot teach that.
It's an interesting question, less in teaching, but more in terms of thinking about how do we communicate something like climate change. The American Psychological Association and others have been arguing that giving people catastrophe scenarios demotivates them. It creates psychological problems. You shouldn't do this. There's an interesting test of that. In 2017, there was a cover story on New York Magazine. I believe the author was David Wallace Wells, and I believe it was Learning to Die in the Anthropocene. I think that's the title of it. But what he did is he strung out all the worst case scenarios, just how bad this could get. And the Gulf Stream stops. You go through it. Read the article. It turned out to be the most read article in New York Magazine's history. It turned into a very, very lucrative book deal. He has a book of the same title. If you read it, read the subsequent issue, read the letters to the editor. It's a very interesting conversation. You shouldn't do this. Yes, I should. people should understand what's going before them. He also goes forward to say that the time is now because it's playing out. So where maybe 10 years ago you shouldn't do this because it was still sort of theoretical, it's now happening before our very eyes. I mean, you have temperature extremes that are testing the limits of human endurance happening right now in Iran. I mean, Iran has the highest temperatures, or is it Iraq? I mean, it's playing out. So they aren't science fiction anymore. There's a wonderful book, The Great Delusion, where he says the challenge of writing about this is that it too easily gets pushed into science fiction. Well, it's not science fiction anymore. It's actually reality. And so that allows for presenting these catastrophe scenarios in a way that people might be more open, where 10 years ago they may not have been.
To that point, in my book, and I'm an organizational psychologist, so I love reading the psychology. Fear is also very motivating, probably more motivating than false hope. And you can look at the references in the book about, where that all comes from. Certainly, I believe that fear is very motivating. Now, doesn't necessarily mean that people be motivated in the direction you want them to be or whatever. But at any rate, so I, at the beginning of my course, always give a lecture on the state of the planet. And I would bring in things like the North American meridional overturning circulation slowing down, and how it's the slowing down is important for the future of Europe, and how catastrophe could happen there, and how it has happened in the past within a period of 10 years, and so on. I would not teach that to my students if I'm looking at the state of the planet. One of the things I do in my course is I use a technique called dialogue. And as a psychologist who's done a lot of that kind of work over the course of my career, I'm comfortable doing that. I write about the dialogue technique, which is a particular technique to help students work with their emotions. Yvonne mentioned earlier that there's an emotional component to this class, and there definitely is. And dialogue is a proven way to help people surface their emotions and work with them in an appropriate classroom-oriented way, so that fear does not become overwhelming or whatever the issues become. So that's how I do it, folks.
A quick clarification, it was David Wallace Wells. If you're looking it up, David Wallace Wells, and the title of the essay and the book is called The Uninhabitable Earth.
Excellent.
One thing that I do with, with this catastrophe, so I try to be positive, but I also start with, I show a video of the tragedy of the comment. There is an interview from Harding in 1980 when he talks about some of these comments and whether we're gonna have food for everyone and so on. And then there is another video from 2020, which is about the planetary boundaries, a TED Talk, Rockstrom, and it talks about the safe operating space. And it's 40 years apart, and they're saying the same thing, right? They're in the same, a lot of the points are similar. And I ask the students, compare one and the other, and whether we made some progress since 1980 when the interview was done, and this 2020, and we seem to be in the same kind of like status. So that's one exercise that I do at the beginning to make them think about this idea of limits that go over them. So
I'm going to jump in there just so that we can get around to that last question, then we can come back. There were a couple of comments in the chat and some questions there as well. I think the mark of a great session is that we run out of time on the positive end, everybody getting excited and asking questions and sharing views. So the last question there is, how do you address the sustainable development goals in your teaching or pedagogical research? And Robert, would you like to kick us off?
Sure. So some of this is to actually enable students to do this. So engaging with student groups to see how they might align with the UN SDGs, so that others are out there pushing for the same thing. And usually, a groundswell from the bottom, and students especially are a great way to enable this. Alumni have come back to us and tried to actually give money to have the SDGs put on walls and be a public display in some way because of something like this. Specifically and more explicitly, I guess, within my consulting classes, my live consulting engagements with clients, we purposely set up the UN SDGs as part of the deliverables to our clients in student team presentations and written reports, and do benchmarking against other companies that are industry competitors to whoever we're working with. If such competitors are available, depends on the project. We've done about 200 projects to date. No two projects have been the same. And they span whole countries, multinational companies, small, medium enterprises, and NGOs. But they all have the SDGs as part of the deliverables for teams to think about and how that would impact a client. So that's one way within the classroom. I'm trying to write about it. I haven't written much about it in terms of the SDGs specifically, but I've published some stuff with Hunter Lovins and Stu Hart and on how programs have enabled this type of change through measurement like the SDGs and how more of it's coming. So there are things out there that are already available to you for resources to draw from, and hopefully those will help in terms of whatever you're looking for and how you might also enable the SDGs yourself.
Yeah, I talk about SDGs too. I think they're not perfect, but I think it's a visual framework to translate grand challenges into, some of the, to me, the SDGs are summary of some of the grand challenges: health, climate, hunger, poverty. So it's useful. And what we try to do, but I'm not very successful in my school, but I've seen other schools are asking faculty, not only from business, but any discipline, to just kind to identify the research with, where is it plays in the SDGs, right? And then that kind of helps. Maybe you want to collaborate with someone in environmental science or public health, and so there's some sort of like tax system connected to that SDGs. So that's seems to be happening. But yeah, some other schools that you mentioned, MIT or no? The one that was doing SDGs earlier.
They're also part of the ACSB accreditation too, right?
No,
Through
you
Standard 9,
mentioned,
but yeah, there's other things.
I don't know. Like a couple of the schools that you mentioned.
Which is the peers.
IMD.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, I said MIT, no, IMD.
IMD,
Okay.
yeah.
The European.
Yeah, European
Yeah.
more ahead than-
They're more ahead of it. It's, global framework.
Maybe in that vein, though, something else that I overlooked to think about or mention: study abroad, right? If you're leading a study abroad or can join one or develop one, these are also opportunities to include this, and the SDGs can easily become a part of that also in terms of what teams look for and do while in another location.
I'm going to give an answer that this is just my take, but I don't use the SDGs that strongly. First of all, if you say it really fast, people think you're saying STDs. I mean, does that happen to you? But that was a stupid answer. To my mind, sustainability has been evolving steadily. We can go through the Brundtland Commission, the triple bottom line, John Elkington disavowing the triple bottom line. We have GRI. And so it's going to be in constant evolution. And this is the model right now. But also, I think about this in the context of the Structure of Scientific Revolutions, Thomas Kuhn's books. We're in a period of revolutionary science right now. We've got a problem. We've got an anomaly we can't figure out. We are in a new era, the Anthropocene. We are, as humans, altering the global climate. This is not an environmental problem. This is something new, and we don't know how to deal with it. We have the planetary boundaries. We have donut economics, which is a way to take planetary boundaries. I don't want to speak for you and your book, but these are all models that in a period of revolutionary science, you've got a lot of models coming forward trying to explain the new reality. What will come out is something that is some kind of an amalgam of the many models that are out there, and we're not there yet. And so while this may be a useful tool right now, and I'm not denying it is, the way I approach it, I try and think about it of all the ideas that are out there and where are we going.
Would you like me to go next? Okay. So, in wandering around and looking at other schools in the last couple of years, my impression is, and I'd be interested in your perspective on this, folks, that the schools that are really thinking about strong sustainability for the planet, and this may have changed in the last year in particular, given new information and new circumstances, but in my experience, those schools that are teaching strong sustainability and are concerned about it are religious schools and mission-driven schools. And everybody else is like, yeah, right? And so my view is that there are many value systems that are looking at this, and a lot of them have to be happen to be religious or somebody's religion or somebody's mission. And for me, the SDGs are an expression of international humanistic values, well done, aspirational, and inspirational. They are a sound moral compass, but they're not the only sound moral compass. And so I'm reluctant to push that as opposed to something else. But what I do push, so for example, ESG is not something that interests me. I think, if you look at the Economist article on ESG the last week or something, I think lays out all the weaknesses of, 3 letters that won't save the planet, standards, moral standards that won't save the planet. So for me, I go back to the government word. Government is good. It's good if it's a democracy, and that the values that we will use to address strong sustainability must come from democratic discussion through democratic governments. And so I'm obviously that's problematic, but that's how I feel. To me, the religion is democracy, so that the plurality of voices can be heard in our countries, plural. So one of the things I worry about is having the business fox guarding the global hen house. That's not going to work. And to me, the alternative is a moral debate that has to be democratic. Thanks.
Good. Well, thank you, Ray, and the panel for your responses. I think we've got a couple minutes, so let's engage the audience and see if there are questions. If anybody on the virtual side has posted something in the chat that they'd like to bring out to the group, now's the time.
Yep, it's good.
First of all, thank you.
Can you hear that, Stuart? Can you hear her?
Okay.
Good, you're good. You can,
Yes.
we can hear you.
So
Yeah.
Now more.
this is a great conversation. I just want to go back to
Tell us who you
the,
are.
what?
Tell us who you are.
Oh, Maritza Spina. I'm at St. Ambrose University in Davenport, Iowa. So thank you, because that's gonna actually, I want to go back to the resistance portion of it. And what would you do if you're in a context where this can become some sort of political conversation, right? And then you have, I'm also the dean of the college. So when you said, yeah, the students want to hear this, but not necessarily the donors or the alumni. And then I have to manage that, how do we focus on this while also teaching other groups? So I'm curious to hear your take on this.
I try to have some benchmarks in terms of if it's other competing schools, right, that are doing this. You can go to institutions or centers that have been developed by them. Benchmarks for companies that are doing this, that are reporting on the SDGs, that have been, parts of sustainability rankings. So when people push back, the last thing is, go to the confrontation mode and try to, challenge their assumptions. I try to go backwards and say, if we go into a benchmarking mode, where does this come from in terms of the other person's comment? What company are you talking about? What other companies in that industry are doing something different? And then leave that out there in terms of a question, maybe in terms of why would they be doing something different? If it wasn't making money, or if it wasn't viable, if it wasn't purpose driven, there's different ways you can intersect when you better know what you're dealing with. But when it comes out of the blue, an audience question and you don't know, that it's coming, it's a tougher context. And I don't know how to respond to some of that on the fly, really, but it depends. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I've had coal company and steel company people openly challenge me and their employees in our classes, right? And I'm like, well, let's look at your competitors. and just let it kind of go from there and avoid something deeper and darker.
I think that that's a really helpful bit of advice, is that this isn't going to be your values coming to the curriculum. This is happening in business. And there's a business imperative to address this. And don't trust me on that, trust Paul Pullman or even the CEO of Shell. They're doing carbon neutral claims. Leave it at that. And they're not doing it because they think the science is flawed. So rest on the shoulders of people that your donors will trust is a really helpful tool.
And maybe terminology, like I have the feeling that sometimes you might not be able to talk about climate change, but you just talk about this long-term energy transition, and sounds like something that is like a euphemism. I don't know if that's a word, but call it in a different way, but you're still embedding the same kind of like, we're moving to renewable, we have to, but climate change is scary and use other terms. So I don't know, maybe that works. Even though I don't know why some people are still scared about climate change. Some of these terms. Right.
It's too vast, it's too big, right?
Yeah.
It's hard to make it personal and visceral. But even in the energy piece of it, you can say, renewables is now the cheapest form of energy generation since 2021, beating out other subsidized industries. And there's other ways we can, steer this arc of the future.
Yeah.
Where do you want to steer it to and why? So I like questions in terms of, I think why is a good one from an operations perspective. If you finally ask the question why 5 times, you might actually get to the root cause of what was behind the question or what might be behind all this other stuff, and then take it into a more meaningful direction.
Yeah, I'm in Michigan. I'm in car capital, and you talk to anyone in the auto sector, the future is electric, and it's autonomous right behind that. This isn't a value statement. In fact, the CEO Joe Mose had a really good comeback when a conservative politician said that the Chevy Bolt was a politically inspired automobile, and he blasted him and said, "This is the future of our company. This is how we're going to make money." And basically told him he was an idiot. I would rest on those people.
We're coming up at the end of the session, so I just want to take a moment to say thank you so much to each of the panel members for sharing your written responses, which are available as a handout attached to the session, and for joining us today and sharing your excellence. The best of the best, showing us how to teach is really, really valuable. And I just want to encourage everybody there to look up many of the publications and works that this panel has created in different management journals if you're looking for further information and ideas. And we're going to be posting more of those on the ONE website on the teaching tab. So keep having a look at that, and please feel free to share further resources with us that we can add there. And so with that, thank you again to the panel, and I'm sure there's going to be some conversations in the room as we wrap up, but I'm going to call it as the end of the session for now. Thank you so much. An excellent session, really valuable, and have a great evening.
Thank you.
Right.